Chenxing Han is the author of Be the Refuge and One Long Listening, a memoir of grief, friendship, and spiritual care.
안녕하세요. Dear Venerables, dear friends in the Dharma, it is a joy and honor to be here with all of you this morning. Thank you to all of the conference organizers and volunteers who have made this year's extraordinary Sakyadhita conference possible. Your generosity is an inspiration. Thank you also to all of the workshop leaders and speakers who have made our learning possible. And a special thanks to the translators and interpreters who have been bridges of understanding between all of us. And finally, last but not least, thank you to everybody here for making this such a vibrant and memorable conference. My paper is titled, Listening to the Buddhists in Our Backyard, Engaging Youth in Community-Based Learning. This paper comes out of a group project called Listening to the Buddhists in Our Backyard that began 2 years ago with a group of high school students near Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. We call ourselves L2BB for short. Instead of reading from my paper today, I would like to summarize the key points and share some images from L2BB so that it can come alive in a more visual way. Although the high school students and Buddhist communities that I will be talking about are more than 10,000 kilometers from here, I hope that each of you will find some points of connection between L2BB and your own local contexts, whether that is a temple, a high school, a college, your own home, or somewhere else. I'm speaking here on behalf of the L2BB team because we would love to learn from all of you. We would love to hear any insights that you have about how we can continue to develop L2BB as a project and as a method of learning and listening. First, let me introduce you to the original Listening to the Buddhists in Our Backyard team from the spring of 2022. This group of 6 high school students, young women from different cultural backgrounds, had the unique opportunity to spend the spring term of senior year immersed in learning about Buddhism from a local perspective. The group had differing levels of familiarity with Buddhism. All had voluntarily signed up to be part of the L2BB project. This image is from a website that the students made during our 10-week project. I want to thank the students for creating an excellent final presentation to share their learning with the broader public. Most of the slides that I am showing you today are slides the students created. In this photo, I am on the right, and my co-teacher, Andy Huzio, who has been teaching at the Students' High School for more than 12 years, is on the left. Our students are between us, and in the center is a monk at the Vietnamese Buddhist temple where this photo was taken. The temple is named Lumbini Buddhist Temple, and it is located in Lawrence, Massachusetts, just 10 minutes away from the students' school. I first connected with the L2BB students when their teacher, Andy, reached out to me after reading my first book, Be the Refuge, Raising the Voices of Asian American Buddhists. This book is based on interviews with 89 young adult Asian American Buddhists from a wide range of ethnic backgrounds. After reading my book, Andy began to wonder if he could take a different approach to teaching about Buddhism in the classroom. Instead of beginning with the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, he wondered what it would be like to begin with local Buddhist communities. Originally, he proposed that we do a project on Buddhism in Boston, which is about 40 minutes south of their school. But we quickly realized that there are at least a dozen Buddhist temples in the Merrimack Valley, all within a 25-minute drive of the school. The students created this map to show the location of the local temples they visited, and their school is marked by the white square in the center. In the first few days of the term, the students spent time in the classroom preparing for local temple visits. They practiced a thinking routine called See, Think, Wonder to strengthen their skills in noticing, reflecting, and asking questions. The students commented that this exercise helped them feel more comfortable in not knowing. Instead of feeling ashamed that they weren't experts, they were excited and curious to learn more from local Buddhists. In focusing on observation and question-making, they avoided making assumptions and jumping to conclusions. Over a period of 8 days, we visited several local temples. The temples were extremely generous and often hosted us for several hours. Temple members patiently answered our many questions. In preparing for this paper, I reflected on how 3 Buddhist women at 3 different temples made a particularly powerful impact on our students. One of them was Venerable Manzong, who lived at the American Wisdom Association in Billerica, Massachusetts. Venerable Manzong had been ordained longer than any of us had been alive. The Venerable's physical and spiritual vigor left a strong impression on the students. She spoke in rapid-fire Mandarin and shared about her extraordinary life story and her perspective on Buddhist teachings and cosmology. The students found their own worldviews both expanded and challenged. At a Thai temple in Bedford, Massachusetts, called Boston Buddhadharma Temple, the students offered food to the monastics. But the person who left the strongest impression on the students was a laywoman named Amy. You can see her in the right of this photo with purple hair. Amy guided us in making offerings and receiving white thread bracelets. She served as a Thai to English translator for the young Thai monk who accompanied us. And through speaking with her, the students began to see that laywomen like Amy are indispensable to the functioning of these temples. We ate lunch together, and the students had a wonderful time listening to Amy's stories and looking at pictures on her phone. In spending time with Amy and Venerable Manzong, they were experiencing firsthand the strength of Buddhist women and the extraordinary diversity of Buddhist traditions. This is a slide from one of the Khmer Buddhist temples that the students visited called Wat Samakhi Santikaram in North Chelmsford, Massachusetts. I'm sorry that I don't have the picture in this PowerPoint, but on the altar in the temple were these beautiful offerings. They were green and looked like almost like flowers or plants. And when the students asked about these green offerings, they were told that the offerings are typically made out of banana leaves in Cambodia. However, because it is difficult to find banana leaves in Massachusetts, the temple instead used glittery green wrapping paper to make the offerings. And after the visit, the students talked about how these offerings demonstrated the ways that Buddhism adapts to different local contexts, whatever country and local context it is in. The students also talked about the realization that simple questions can lead to deeper insights. They did not have to impress the temple members by asking complicated questions to prove how smart they were. Instead, even a question as simple as, "This is beautiful, what is it?" could lead to nuanced conversations. They realized that this was especially important due to the language barriers that they encountered in these temples. One of our final temple visits was to a small home temple run by a handful of Vietnamese Buddhist nuns called Dinh Viên Quan Âm Pagoda. The nuns at this temple were hoping to expand, and as you can see in the upper right photo, one of the lay people in the community was showing us the model of the temple that they were hoping to build. So the inside of the current temple, as you can see, is very beautiful, but it's not big enough to accommodate the growing Buddhist community. Our students gained an appreciation for the hard work and patience required to build a Buddhist temple in a country where Buddhism is still very much a minority religion. After the temple visits, our students began to reflect on their experience and to conduct further research through reading and interviewing scholars. One of the scholars they spoke to was Dr. Tam Tran, who had developed a youth group program at her temple. In this photo, Dr. Tran is on the left in glasses with the temple cat, Mickey, and 3 of our students. Dr. Tran's temple, Chùa Tuong Ban in Lowell, Massachusetts, was the first temple the students visited. The main hall has several beautiful altars, and as you can see, the main altar has an elaborate mural painted behind it. The students were astonished that what seemed like a modest house on the outside was a vibrant religious space on the inside. They asked many questions, and several students later returned to participate in the youth group program. Our students were extremely moved by the generosity that they received at the temples. The culture of giving was different from what they were used to in their competitive school environments. Even though the students were not receiving a grade for L2BB, they felt motivated to create meaningful work. Indeed, because they have formed meaningful relationships with local Buddhists whom they deeply respected, the students felt even more motivated than if they were just producing work for a teacher or for a grade. The L2BB team spent time reflecting as a group and reviewing their individual notes. Visiting so many different temples, it was easy to forget what we heard or get mixed up. Luckily, we were able to compare notes to check our understanding. We joked that we were like an 8-headed anthropologist. The students also consulted books based on the topics they wanted to learn more about. They pursued individual research projects on a diverse range of topics, including engaged Buddhism in praxis, Buddhist pedagogy, Khmer language and cultural maintenance, dana and merit economy, agency in young adult Asian American Buddhists, and self-discovery in Buddhist storytelling. In developing meaningful work, the L2BB students thought about who would be their authentic audiences. These included other students and teachers at their high school, but also extended beyond the school campus to include temple leaders and local community members they met, scholars they had spoken with, and practitioners interested in connecting with their own local communities. The students produced blog posts for the online website Buddhist Store Global, aimed at practitioners and Buddhist educators. They also wrote blog posts for the Tang Institute, aimed at educators who are interested in experiential learning and engaged pedagogy. They produced temple profiles of American Wisdom Association and Chùa Tuong Ban for the Pluralism Project at Harvard University after meeting the founders of the Pluralism Project. And as I mentioned previously, they conducted individual research. In reflecting on their learning journey, the L2BB students felt humbled and grateful. They recognized that one can easily devote a lifetime to learning about Buddhism. They were not going to become experts in Buddhism in 10 short weeks, but they recognized the unique perspective they could offer as high school students who had spent time integrating local temple visits with book learning. Their understanding of Buddhism was embodied and sensory rather than solely intellectual or philosophical. And as a result, they felt the impact of their learning in a long-lasting way. They made this slide to show some of the themes that stuck with them. In communal learning and civic engagement, they contemplated the value of an education beyond individualistic benefits. In learning and the beyond and see, think, wonder, they embraced the value of supplementing book learning with experiential education beyond the classroom. In generosity and dana, they reflected on the ethical and spiritual values that drive our actions. And in embracing ignorance, they chose to stop pretending that they knew more than they did, instead choosing to relate to what they did not know as a source of connection with others. We recognize that not everyone will have the privilege of learning from local Buddhists in a sustained way over many weeks, but we also considered how listening to the Buddhists in our backyard can be adapted to other contexts. Too often, especially in the American context, people learn about Buddhism only from the written word or popular media, rather than from the living Buddhists in their own hometowns. Rather than seeing local Buddhists as objects of study, we were able to see ourselves as collective learners whose lives are woven into a common fabric with those of our Buddhist neighbors. I would add that this method of visiting local temples helped foreground the contributions of women whose labor was on clear display in each temple that we visited. As Scott Mitchell writes in his recently published book, The Making of American Buddhism, quote, Buddhists and scholars co-create and co-recreate Buddhism through collective acts of labor. We have the ability to change that discourse and a responsibility to the communities with which we share space, end quote. Our students realized the importance of asking difficult questions about what it means to feel a sense of responsibility and even kinship to local Buddhists. Even if they might not personally identify as Buddhist, by choosing to study Buddhism and learn from Buddhist neighbors, they began to see themselves as students and scholars who could shape the discourse around American Buddhism and build relationships of care with American Buddhists. In closing, I would like to read from the last 2 paragraphs of my paper. I have been transformed by listening to the Buddhists in our backyard, as a project and as a practice. The students have been my teachers. Too often, we underestimate what young people are capable of. Too often, we neglect to build the structures and environments required for transformative, lifelong learning. Spacious time and meaningful relationship are integral components to such learning. Buddhist temples can be master classes in inhabiting spacious time and meaningful relationship. In the United States, Buddhists make up an estimated 1% of the population. Of this 1%, 2/3 are of Asian heritage. Buddhism's impact on the broader culture is, of course, much greater than 1%. In deepening our relationship with our Buddhist neighbors, the majority of whom are of Asian heritage, we tasted the richness and diversity of American Buddhism. We hope this project can inspire greater intra-Buddhist as well as inter-religious learning. Would you join us by reaching out to your Buddhist neighbors? Endless possibilities for learning and connection await. Thank you very much.